Well, hello there guys and girls, my name's Mikey and welcome back to another of our beginner how to draw videos. Now this is the third video in my how to draw basics series. We've done the first most important lesson you need to know, and we've also done the basic shapes and forms which are the building blocks behind loads of complex structures. In this video, we're going to be talking about light and shadow. Essentially, when it comes to your drawings, if you understand how an object will reflect light and cast a shadow, it's really going to help you with your shading, and it's really going to make your work stand out as existing in a three-dimensional space. Now, when it comes to objects in general, everything that we see is dictated by the amount of light that bounces off of it into our eyes. And if you guys are not aware of the basics, I've done a very quick diagram. Science time. Here we've got a picture of the sun, here's me, Mikey, and here's you, whoever you are. And when you look at me, what's really happening, if we imagine this is in the real world and not through a YouTube video, is that light is coming off of a light source like the sun, and that could be a lamp, it could be anything, it could be the screen of a TV. It's bouncing off the object, the Mikey, and then it's bouncing into your eyes. That's how it happens. And of course, if it's me that you're looking at, you're probably just thinking, yeah, great view, right? I can't blame you. But basically, just imagine that. If you want to know what's happening with your shadows and your shading with your characters and your work and your art in general, if you know where the light's coming from, it's really going to help you understand where all the shadows are going. And of course, you can imagine light as traveling in a straight line as a form of a wave, but really it's packets of energy and science is a lie, so don't worry about it. So let's just start off with a fairly simple example. Now I'm going to go ahead and start by just lightly sketching out an object that we've drawn before previously. We're going to draw a cube, and I'm going to try to make this cube looks like it exists in a three-dimensional space. And again, the thing that's going to sell that idea is going to be the fact that it's going to cast a shadow once we understand what's going on with the light form. If you're following along at home, of course, don't worry too much about your geometrics or the shapes of your objects looking perfect. That's not what we're worrying about today. So I'm just going to relatively quickly draw out this box. And when it comes to light, you can almost think of it as a dosage. The nearer you are to the light source, the more light is going to bounce off of you or an object, and it's going to obviously be lighter and perhaps even brighter. And the further away it is from the light source, it's going to come off as being a bit darker and a bit more in shadow. So here we've got a cube. We're not going to worry too much about making it absolutely perfect, but I'm going to essentially pretend that there's a light source somewhere very vaguely, let's say up here. Somewhere over here we've got a lamp. Now we don't have to make it too perfect, but what I'm basically trying to say is that if you know where your light source is coming from, we're going to imagine this is a very wide light source, so maybe light's coming in fairly evenly across the board, but you just need to know from the light source, go to the edge of your object and start to continue past the edge of your object to understand, that's where the light is going past it, and this is the point where the light is hitting the object and leaving the area behind in darkness, in shadow. So I can start to come out there. If I imagine a very similar thing over here, I might come off from this line as well and come out a little bit at an angle over here. And again, because this light source is going to be high up and it's going over the object, it might very loosely stop somewhere just over here to make some kind of shape that's representative of the cube. Again, I'm not massively making this one perfect, but you kind of get the idea. And when it comes to this area of shadow that we're very loosely mapping out, I'm just trying to imagine that the light's going over the top of this edge of the box and casting down here, and just coming over this corner to cast maybe just a bit further out in this direction before it comes up here. Now again, your shadows don't have to be perfect, but if you've got an understanding of where these shadows are and the different surfaces, it's really going to help you out. So before we even go into this shadow for a moment, let's talk about the surfaces of this box. There are two steps when it comes to thinking about the light source. The first step is your main light source, and the second step is all about indirect light. Now we're going to talk about that in just a moment, so don't worry too much. Let's focus firstly about a single light source. Because this is high up, I'm going to imagine that there's a lot of light hitting the top of this cube, so I'm going to leave that quite nice and bright. In terms of this edge, it's relatively near the light, but it is still a little bit in shadow, but it's not completely facing in the wrong direction. So what I might consider doing is shading this part of the box here a particular type of grey, just to show that it's not directly catching the light, but it's only slightly turned away. There might be lights from other areas, there might be light bouncing all around the room, but it's also just keeping that tone up. And then I'm going to imagine on this side that's in a lot more darkness, so I'll just take a really quick moment to just fill that in using my pencils held quite far back, you'll notice, and I'm using the pencil on its side to get a very flat large edge, which really helps me just smoothly shade a fairly large area. But all of a sudden what you should notice is that this cube all of a sudden really does start to look like it's in 3 dimensions, because each surface now has a slightly different quality, and your brain's starting to imagine that that's basically describing the amount of light it's picking up or not catching at all, i.e. left in shadow. So all of a sudden we've got that idea. And again, because we're imagining that light might be bouncing all around the place as well, when it comes to our shadow, the further away the shadow is from the object, we might not actually shade that too dark. That might be something very light that's going on. And then as we get closer to the object, because there's less of this wide space to be lit up by other ambient light sources or reflecting light, as we get closer, and I'm just putting down a very base layer, not to worry, like so, and let's say that again, as we get closer, things are actually going to get darker, and this is where it all comes in, right up to the point where if we get very close to the base of our object, where the shadow is touching the object as well, be it a cube, a chair, a car, or anything you like, that's probably where the shadow is going to be at its darkest. And if you're sort of drawing various objects at home where things are very light and very dark, have a lot of contrast, then you could put your shadow right next to the object, almost as being black itself. Just imagine it being really, really dark. Basically, just imagine the heart of my ex-girlfriend and you'll get the idea. So okay, that's how I want you guys to think about light and shadow when it comes to simple geometric flat surfaces, but we're going to have a go with something ever so slightly more difficult, but also very, very important to talk about, because if you get this one down, the world is your oyster. We're going to talk about just applying shadows to a curved surface and how a curved surface drops a shadow of its own and where it's catching the light and really what that's up to. Now, every time you watch any kind of tutorial on light or shading, I think this is probably the most common thing you're going to see, how to shade a sphere or a ball of some sort. I've just built this up again by using some very light line strokes, and of course we've already covered this in our other basic shapes tutorial video about how you can draw circles and other shapes, so do make sure again that you've checked that out. And whilst I'm getting this circle sorted out, if you haven't already, make sure that you've hit that subscribe button so that you can follow along with the channel for more of our how to draw videos in the future. It'd be really cool and we can hang out for further videos. But here is our sphere, everybody. And what I'm going to imagine is that our light source this time is at less of an angle. We're talking about something very general, coming down from very far away, kind of like an ambient skylight or something like that, casting down on this object. Now, what I can imagine firstly is that as the light comes down, it's going to hit this circle, and I'm going to find the edge and imagine that that light is going to go past the circle, or past the sphere I should say, on this side and light the area below it, but everything on this side is catching the sphere, so it's going to leave the bottom part in shadow. So I'm going to go here and I'm going to imagine maybe the light's coming down almost straight down here as well. And if we've got the sphere itself sitting on a surface about here, I'm going to imagine it in 3 dimensions as if we're looking ever so slightly upwards, and we're going to use this at a bit of a guide point, losing my words there, to map out the shape of its shadow, which is going to be an oval. So again, just a flattened circle, squeezed flat as an oval shape, which I'm just changing my page around so it's a bit easier for my hands to draw the shape in, essentially. But we're going to be left with something vaguely like this. Just take that edge off there. And that very, very basically is telling us where the shadow is for this particular object. Now, again, when it comes to the shadow itself, most of this is very near this circle, so this sphere, so we can just go straight ahead and start to make that fairly dark. You can go as light or as dark as you want. It always depends about the kind of scene, the drawing or the picture that you're trying to create. And whilst I fill this in, it's always worth just saying the quickest way to get a feel for things or understand shadows and understand light is look around you every day. Sometimes in the morning it's all very flat, sometimes in the middle of the day you get really harsh shadows cast by objects in the bright sunlight. Maybe if you're just at home in a room and you've just got one lamp on, take a look around and look at all of the shadows that objects are casting, because you get so used to them, after a while you don't even see they're there. But if you start to really look around, you're going to see a lot of stuff. So what I wanted to talk about is that with this object, obviously we know about shadows and making things maybe a little bit darker as they get a little bit closer to the object, and they can be a little bit lighter as they're further away. But we're going to talk about how you would shade the object itself. Now, all of this area that's catching the main part of the light around here, that's kind of facing all of this bright light right at the top, is essentially where you'd have the lightest point, which is called the highlight, and then everything else is going to shade round to be darker, except as well as the light coming down from the top. So I'm going to just start to very, very lightly just put a bit of surface texture onto this. As well as the light coming down from the top, you've actually got loads of light in the real world bouncing off of everything, and you've got light, as well as it bouncing off the corners of a room and hitting the object, you'll have light that's shining down, bouncing off the table or the surface that this is sitting at, and bouncing back up towards the object. So lights may be coming down here, bouncing up there as well. And the closer this circle is to a reflective surface, it's actually going to light it up ever so slightly from beneath as well. And that's our secondary or our indirect light source. And this is great to make something look 3D, but once you start to put an indirect light source as well, your brain is going to understand that as well as being more realistic. So again, what I'm going to do is just think the further away from the light, the darker we're going to go. And I'm shading this fairly quickly, so I will maybe tidy these up in a bit as well. But if you imagine that we're going further away and it's darker, but then with that shading, as we go darker again, around about here, I'm not going to shade all the way to the bottom. I'm going to leave that not light, but certainly not as dark as the darkest point, as the area where there's the most amount of shadow. And then again, might just do that and make it even darker up here. And then I'm just going to blend that around together by putting another layer over everything around about here, as light as I can, but also working relatively quickly. And there you can see all of a sudden we've got an object which is lit from above. It's going into shadow where it's not catching as much of the light as the surface curves away, but it's not absolutely dark where it sits on the surface here, because it's catching some more reflected light. And if you look at pictures of marbles or pool balls or anything in real life, any object that's sitting on a surface, you might just see that there's that indirect light actually lighting it from a different method as well. And that is the key thing that's really going to help you out. You've got your direct light source, understanding the shape of your object, understanding where the light hits it and maybe doesn't, so it's going to help you think about your shadow. Bear in mind, you might have more than one light source and multiple shadows, which are much softer. Play with that another time. But also about thinking about the indirect light source and how it bounces back and affects things. Another game changer. Now, sometimes the shapes that you might be working with in your art are very complex, but the basic rules behind it are going to be fairly simple. And eventually what we'll do in our basic series is take everything we've learnt to have a go at drawing something that's a little bit more detailed and interesting and see how it all fits together. Okay everybody, so I'm going to drop into a little bit of time lapse, but don't worry, it's just me getting out some pens to tidy up the artwork just a little bit, and it's a great opportunity for me to say thank you very much for watching along with these videos and clicking that subscribe button. Art and drawing in general is something that's really close to my heart. I think it has a lot of therapeutic properties and helps de-stress people if it's something that they're passionate about, and that's why I want to make these free drawing tutorials for you guys on YouTube. However, the only reason that it's actually possible is because of your support on Patreon. So let me just say an extra great big thank you to Gyro P, Mike, Simon B, John Hall V, Ghost91120, Fur, Thomas C, Shinobu, General Z, Homongchi L, Blue Mercy Studios, John D, Cogleaf, Ray C, The Clamps, TAVR, Joe R, Kaidi Art, Ryder2KX, Josh, Michael S, Trent H, Adam D, Luke C, Wes B, Steve R, Julio Felix O, Savon S, Jamie, Carlos R, Taylor S, Jake Y, Furry Friend, Rory A, Dave W, Quay Joseph, Christian L, Gabriel R, Minion 715, ICZ, Adam T, and Nikolai HH. Among others, you guys have really helped me out on Patreon. I do appreciate it. And of course, if you guys want to get involved or just check out some of the rewards and artwork you get there, then click the link on screen or in the description below. So let me know how you're getting on with the shading of your objects in the comment section, guys, and I'll see you next time.